The PSBA is committed to diversity, inclusion, and equity work. As an organization founded in Tacoma, Washington, we acknowledge the Puyallup tribe and invite you to visit the official website of the Puyallup and listen to their land acknowledgement statement. The Puyallup people have lived on and stewarded these lands since the beginning of time and continue to do so today. We recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small step towards true allyship, and we commit to offering opportunities to uplift the voices, experiences, and histories of the Indigenous people of this land and beyond.
Thank you so much, Lori. We always appreciate your expertise in handling our Zoom meetings, and it is a delight to be here today. Welcome to everyone. On behalf of the Puget Sound Book Artists Organization and our 2026 Exhibition Committee, it has been wonderful to collaborate with two other important book arts organizations in the area. And I welcome Jody Fenton, President of the Northwest Chapter of the Guild of Book Workers, and Celine Fisher, the current President of the Book Arts Guild, to share in our introductions today. Thank you so much for working together to make this session possible. We have a lot to pack in a short time, so a word about our format before we launch into our program. Along with Celine and Jody, we will introduce all three speakers at the onset, and then each speaker will share their presentations and remarks. We'll hold questions and comments to review once our speakers have all had a chance to share their commentary. So, launching into introductions, we are delighted to welcome three leading voices in the book arts for a conversation about best practices in our field. Whether you are new to the book arts or a seasoned professional, we can all benefit from the wisdom and expertise of our three distinguished panelists. Whether you're grappling with writing a clear and compelling artist statement, for those of you that might be thinking about the 2026 exhibition coming up, or you're wanting to know more about developing and curating exhibitions, documenting your own work or documenting artist books in general, or simply maintaining awareness of emerging themes in book arts, this session will no doubt inspire and enrich our understanding of the field. And now for our introductions. I have the pleasure of introducing Erin Zona. Erin is an artist, curator, and arts administrator with 2 decades of experience in artist books, publishing, education, archival work, and nonprofit leadership. We are delighted that she is the new curator of the Cynthia Sears Artist Book Collection at the Bainbridge Island Museum of Art. Prior to joining BIMA, Zona worked as a co-executive director of the Women's Studio Workshop, and during her tenure at the workshop, she advanced cultural and fundraising campaigns that expanded the organization's philosophy of gender and developed its on-site archive into a dynamic research resource. As director of their publishing imprint, she oversaw the production of more than 27 new artist book titles and represented 200 artists from the organization's publishing history, placing artist books in hundreds of collections across the United States. We are so delighted to have you in the Pacific Northwest, Erin, and look forward to your remarks. And now I'm going to hand the program over to Celine from the Book Arts Guild.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm very pleased to be introducing Alicia Bailey, who is one of those Renaissance women who seems to have more hours in the day than the rest of us with all the things that she does. Well, it seems like to me. She is a curator and exhibition hanger and owner of the A.B. Siderian Gallery, the Artist Books Gallery in Denver, Colorado, also online, that I'm sure you have seen listings for, flyers for exhibitions. She is the treasurer currently, or she has been the treasurer in the past. That's how I met her, when she was treasurer for Focus on Book Arts. She's also done that for Guild of Book Workers. Currently is the exhibitions and workshops coordinator for the Rocky Mountain chapter of the Guild of Bookworkers, and she's an artist in her own right, producing regularly artist books that are filled with her personality, I suppose you would say. I always feel like I know just a little bit more about Alicia when I read one of her books. So I'm really pleased that we're going to be hearing from her today. And Jody.
Hi, I have the pleasure of introducing Johanna Drucker. Um, Johanna is a person who understands, and I mean really understands, book arts, first as an artist herself, then as a critic, a scholar, a historian, and as an astute observer. She received her BFA from the California College of Arts and Crafts and then a PhD from UC Berkeley. Her first artist book was published in 1972, and her many subsequent artworks are held in public and private collections. But it's her critical work about this new art genre that gets my attention because it has furthered the discussions around the very nature and function of letter forms, typography, the avant-garde, and art that sequences rather than presents itself as static. She has taught at a number of colleges and universities, received numerous grants and awards, published books that explore the very nature of book art and the new role it now plays in modern art and culture. You can access all her many writings and lectures and studio work on her website, which is in the chat. All of this has grown her knowledge and understanding of the artist book in the modern day and is much to our advantage. So when it comes to learning about writing about book arts, a book artist's statement per se, Johanna brings a unique, thoughtful, reasoned, and deep perspective. She has been through it. She's done it herself. She's extracted aesthetic tenets and created a language of that philosophy. She has understood the potential of the far-reaching meaning for the visual narrative and the unique and special role the book has played in this and is likely to play going forward. So I look forward to her comments, and I love reading her work.
Thank you all, by the way, for inviting me to do this and including me in this conversation. I have to say, watching people come into the meeting, it's a little bit daunting because you're all such accomplished folks. But I prepared just a few slides to talk about artist statements and, a few general principles that I think are helpful. They're fairly generic. They apply to many forms of artwork, not just the book, but I will say a few things about books when I come to the end. So the main purpose of an artist statement, I think, is for you to address the very basic question: what do you want someone to know about your work that they can't get just by looking at your work? And that seems so obvious on some level, but it means you have to give them a framework. And I'll give you some very specific ideas about what I think that framework might include. But I thought I'd start with a couple of artist statements. These are two very famous people whose statements I'm going to show you. And here's Yayoi Kusama, the wonderful Japanese conceptual installation artist. And she says, "My art originates from hallucinations only I can see. I translate the hallucinations and obsessional images that plague me into sculptures and paintings." Okay, that's interesting. Bit abstract, a bit vague, but okay. And then Annie Leibovitz. "I don't have two lives. This is one life. The personal pictures and assignment work are all part of it. Photography has always been a passion of mine. I've been fortunate enough to pursue it as a career. My approach to photography has always been spontaneous. I'm interested in the moment, not the time it took to get there." The contrast between these two statements, I think, is useful. The Kusama is very evocative and has a kind of suggestive quality. Frankly, Annie Leibovitz's personal statement, it's so generic that almost you could apply it to almost anybody could use it and appropriate it. So which of these is going to illuminate our looking at someone's work? I'm going to use my friend Susan B's statement that she used for the Brooklyn Museum.
think about what she had to say in this. And her first paragraph, really addresses artwork, the framework, the painting, artist books, gender, portrayal of women, poetry, humor, irony. In other words, there's substance here. But then she shifts into education, her own background, and then her schooling. So here's again something to think about. An artist statement is not an artist bio. If we go back and look in detail at Susan's statement, that first paragraph has substantive information, but it situates her work. The bio material doesn't really belong in an artist statement. You should keep that for your bio note. So let me give you another striking example here of work and an artist statement. This is work by a German conceptual artist named Christian Wölflen. And I can tell you this is hard work. This is difficult work to engage with. I wrote a catalog essay about it this year. I have great respect for him, and I'm interested in this work. But it's not work that most people coming into a gallery are necessarily going to be able to engage with. So what function does the artist statement have to have? Well, here we follow, here we see. Wölflen immediately situates his work. Whether you like it or don't like it isn't the issue. He immediately situates his work within an aesthetic frame, a number of movements. He moves from naming that into the description of his approach. So you get neo-conceptual and neo-constructivist, and then he tells you what he has done and, and how he has done it. Assembling this industrially produced, very specific vocabulary here, wood slats, drafting film, put perception of space to the test, coordinate systems he's developed, and so on and so forth. We could go through this, in more detail. Again, ordinary as the materials may be, it's their arrangement he wants you to notice. So again, he's calling out the aspects of his work that would not necessarily be self-evident to you. You'd go, what is this lumber doing here? What is this thing doing here? And I deliberately picked this sculptor's work because, again, it is, I think, somewhat challenging to most viewers to really go, okay, what's he doing here? Why is this of value? The artist explores the makeup, talks about dimensions, structure and space, inside, outside, the relationship of construction and ordering. So when you go back then and look at this work again with the artist statement, it's illuminated. It has become something that you can engage with. Again, like it or not isn't the issue. The point is you see what the artist is doing, and it isn't necessarily self-evident from the work. Once you see this statement, you go, oh, I see. Construction and ordering, dimension, structure, and space. This is a very different kind of artist statement. It's from an exhibit we just saw this week called Piece by Piece, a community of mosaic artists. And I wanted to put this in because of one of the final points I'll make with my next slide, which is that it's very personal. Rosa is a mosaic artist inspired by her 3 children, whose future motivates her to keep moving forward. She's created mosaics for more than 10 years, although her artistic journey paused during the challenges of the pandemic. In early 2023, she returned to her passion by rejoining Piece by Piece community, rediscovering the joy of making art. So the point of putting this into contrast with Wölflen is they couldn't be more different. Wölflen is a very conceptual, very theoretical artist, and here Rosa S. is speaking from the heart in a very personal way. And both of these things have their place, and both of them have their strength. So here's my really kind of crucial slide. What kinds of things make an artist statement work? What are the ways in which you can talk about your work to illuminate it for a viewer in ways that aren't going to necessarily show immediately when they're looking at it? So these would be the points I would suggest. And again, if we went back and looked at these earlier statements, we could ask, do they do this? What's the project? what's the problem that you set for yourself as an artist with the work? What was the motivation for it? So in other words, what's the conception that you began with? What are the invisible aspects of the work? Sorry, my my controls are covering theirs. What is it you want someone, again, what are the invisible aspects? What do you want someone to know that they can't get from looking, or that you think will help them to engage with the work? So, oh, this was actually made out of a scrap of cloth that came through my family that has these associations. It's not something that you can get just by looking. Critical frame, and again, this is where I think Christian did a really good job. It's what are the traditions or aesthetic frameworks that provide a foundation for what you're doing? I'm working with craft traditions. I'm working with, Oulipo writing under constraint. I'm working with, the poetics of, the lyric, the personal lyric. In other words, where are you coming from? Be specific. Offer concrete description to call attention to very specific features. So, and again, we felt that with Christian. He's saying, look, I'm using these industrially produced materials. I'm using this kind of drafting film and so forth. So you're giving somebody a language, a vocabulary for your project. Situate the project. How does this work fit into your overall trajectory and career? You're an emerging artist, a young, new artist, somebody who has recovered their craft. As Rosa says, I went back to this for these reasons. Or this is a line that I've been following for 10 years. I'm really interested in the history of this region and exposing aspects of it that aren't necessarily well known. Production details. Is there an unusual technique or approach that wouldn't be apparent? Did the production alter the original problem? So you started with a problem. As you work through the project, did that problem transform? And then context, and this is where, again, I think Rosa's statement is very useful by contrast to Christian's. For whom and in what situation is this statement going to appear? Is it in a catalog retrospective of your work? Is it a wall label? Is it a case label? Are you in a group show? Are you in, a kind of very public space with a broad, very wide-ranging audience? Is it an esoteric space with a fairly niche audience? Is it, so again, consider the context. For whom and in what situation does the statement appear? And I'll just finish with one description that comes from a book of my own. Again, the link to my site was in the chat. And a lot of my works have a kind of procedural foundation to them. And this book, Proof Before Laying, which I did sometime in the mid-90s, was, as I say here, a continuation of earlier projects in which the constraints of letterpress are used generatively. And some of those earlier works were the word made flesh, Through Light in the Alphabet, A to Z, or even the typesetting choices that structure against fiction. So I'm signaling to my readers here that, this is part of a way of working that I've been involved with in other projects, but in each case, it's unique. The project here was to take utterly new fonts, newly cast fonts of type, upper and lower case, in all their pristine newness and perfection as the ground from which language would arise. And that was very seductive to me. So there's my problem. There's what I'm setting myself. Technique, the type was beautiful, shiny, new, unworn, unblemished, the very image of potential at the core of the book. Not showing you the pages here, but the central text block was made by taking those newly cast fonts and making continual rearrangement block after block until all of the letters in the font had been included. So the resetting, the rule was each successive page had to incorporate the previous page's language, preserve it in some recognizable way while moving ahead and always making a coherent statement. And as the book goes along, the full set of typographic elements is pressed into service, thus figuring the language against the jealous ground of unset type. So there's a critical theoretical issue that is driving the project as a whole. So I've situated the work, given it a critical context, tried to show you how to see what I was up to, shown you the problem I was trying to solve, describe a bit about the technique, and then, sort of wrap it up. And with that, I am going to wrap it up. So I'll stop there.
Well, this is great. What I am going to be talking about is completely different from what Johanna just said, and it fits. As she mentioned that your writing needs to fit a lot of different. It can end up in a lot of different places, and so I'm going to talk a little bit about how I have been structuring my writing practice so that I can be efficient and use similar writings over and over again without having to sit down and write a new bit of text every time I'm called upon to have any writing done about any number of things, an individual book, an exhibit, a blog post, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm outlining this practical system for getting the thoughts out of my head and into a written form for a variety of purposes. I've set this structure up because I have a lot of anxiety, and I also am not a confident writer. And so by using a system and a structure, I'm able to overcome both of those realities about myself. People talk about the blank page or the blank canvas, and this is a way to address that situation and have forward motion by using a structure. So also personality-wise, my attraction to book arts has a lot to do with, I feel like I'm a magpie sometimes. I'm just out in the world gathering a lot of things that I'm curious about, that interest me, materials, ideas about things, structures, and then my role in book arts in my studio is to assemble a selection of these objects into a form that I'm currently engaged with. And for writing, I kind of approach that the same way. It's a lot of these, I think of it sort of as a roundup. So that goal is corralling and gentling this herd of chaotic thoughts so that they can be put to work for me. So I also write to structure, which is like by setting parameters. So I will usually create a book structure and lay it out with images and places for text before I write the text. And then I figure out how many words I will need to, how many words I want to include in that project. And that's when I do my writing, again, because I find the parameters of, they just help me move forward to have a specific end goal. And these days I notice, and I do this myself at Abecedarian, there's usually a character limit or a word limit. And so it's helpful to know the word limit before actually crafting a project specific bunch of writing. I do a lot, as was mentioned in the introduction, and so I value efficiency and trying to not be redundant. And again, I'm just not a confident writer, so I use this system to kind of get past all of that. So what I have been doing since the early 2000s is I use a digital journal. Actually, I've used a digital journal for longer than that. I don't keep a handwritten journal, and I've used the same digital journal since the early 2000s, and Lori's going to put the links to the specific software that I'm using into the chat, although these are just my preferences. I have lost a lot of data over the years of working with computer technology, so I tend to choose software and systems that has longevity. It's not this kind of trendy proprietary way of working. The digital journal that I use is one that is more like a writing an organizing writing software. And what I love about it is I can do keyword searches. I have thousands and thousands and thousands of entries, and I can do a keyword search. I keep my process notes in there. I keep my ideation in there, my conceptual thoughts, and the timeline of when I do things. At this point in my life, I've done so much work that I can't remember when I did that. So it makes it easy for me to look up aspects about a piece that I can then draw on when I'm writing about that work. And one of the things that was unanticipated was that as I'm writing a statement, if I do this keyword search in my journal, I'm taken back to ideas and thoughts I had about a project that they got kind of camouflaged, or other concerns took priority. And I've even forgotten a little bit about what those thoughts were, and they can really be an exciting thing to then include in a statement. I write every day about a variety of things, and this way I'm not having to wade through pages and pages and pages of material to find just exactly what I need. So that's the main tool that I use. And I also rely heavily on, this is more for the logistic management of things. I rely pretty heavily on what's called a relational database, and it's far more useful than a spreadsheet. There's a lot of them around. There's a lot of them that they live in the cloud. They're subscription based. I've been using one called FileMaker, and it's been around for 40 years. It's very safe and it's a very useful tool. It's expensive and it has a steep learning curve, but it's worth it to me because I'm able to keep track not only of all of my own work, but all of the work that's consigned to me. I have 2 separate databases, and it's just a way of being organized so that I'm not trying to find the information that I need when I need it. So that's my second component. And so I will often, if I'm writing a specific statement, I will pull things both from my digital journal and from my FileMaker database, depending on what the statement needs to be about. If it's if they want more information about materials, then that's in the FileMaker database. And I just have a Word document or something, a text document open, and I paste things in there and revise and edit them as needed. And it works pretty well. I've done a lot of writing in my role with Abecedarian Books, and I've gotten such a higher level of confidence in my writing ability that I now am writing all my own content for my own books, which I didn't used to. I used to use other people's words in my books. So I'm happy about that because that's been an aspiration of mine for quite a long time. And the last thing that I use, not very frequently, is just a note-taking system. Sometimes I have things throughout the day that occurred to me, and I just take a quick note. There's a bunch of them out there, and those I don't keep very long. I just look at them maybe once every week or two and grab the ones that are still holding my interest and incorporate them or get rid of them. And that is, let me just look at my notes and make sure I didn't miss anything. I think that pretty well sums up my system for writing statements, essays, blog posts, descriptions for my online catalog, website pages, everything. That's how I do it all. So I'm now going to ask Erin to take it away.
I'm taking a little bit of a different approach just because, and this will make sense towards the end, but I wanted to, first of all, kind of introduce myself to all of you, And because I'm, happily so thrilled to be new to the Pacific Northwest and working in the collection at BIMA. And I wanted to share a little bit of my perspective on what it means to kind of move into a curatorial role from an artist representation role. I really, as an individual, I'm an artist. I work in my studio every day. I wake up in the morning and I do a little bit. It's how I spend my night in the evenings, especially since I'm new to an area and don't have community yet. So I'm actually working in studio a lot. But my work is not artist book based. I have been working in printmaking and sort of in service to an art form for, since I took my first printmaking class in college in 1998. And so I think I'm unique as a participant in the artist book world because I don't make artist books, but I work really intimately with artists and am working in service to the artist book in the world. So I wanted to share this slide because it's kind of just a little bit of a way to kind of describe the way I see artist books and I think of artists when I meet them and I see their work. In the past, when I worked at Women's Studio Workshop, I did lots of things there as an executive director, but my favorite part was working with the artists on the production of their artist books. And so these slides are just meant to kind of show you all the different ways that I and the staff that I worked with worked to, bring artist books into the world with artists. And this is a production shots from a book called 11033 by eBay Belinda Crawley. This was a book that we worked on. It was kind of the first book that we were able to make right after COVID, the big COVID shutdown was over. And I really see myself, and I still see myself this way. That I draw that little image of a triangle. It's a kind of a triangle vertical in that image, but if you imagine it as a horizontal, in a horizontal plane, with the artist vision at the forefront, is kind of the way that I see myself in the vehicle of kind of pushing artist books into the world. I follow the artists and their vision. And when I was at Women's Studio, I had the great privilege of working with a very skilled person, Chris Patrone, who's in that top image, talking to eBay. She's been producing artist books at Women's Studio for over 25 years, I think, at this point. She's worked on hundreds of artist books. And the way we kind of negotiated our relationships with the artist vision at the front was that I kind of worked in the more conceptual realm with the artists, talking about the materials and the way that those materials were a vehicle for their idea. And Chris Patrone was the person who was able to make everything that the artist could think of to make it work, to make the pages turn the way we needed to make the paper that we needed if the paper that we could find didn't work. And so the three of us, plus our amazing group of interns and other staff members that would come in and out, would also, work in this way. And so, the other part of my work there was to, maintain, and this is still true, but to maintain relationships with artists where I understand more about what they're trying to do. So I always like to meet with an artist when I was working with them on a book, and I would say, what does this book need to do for you? And that answer is really different for people based on, where they are in the world or in their life. Some artists would say, I need 100 copies of this book. I need it to cost less than $20, or I need 1,000 copies. It needs to cost less than $20. I need it in people's hands and I need it there right now. And then some artists would say, I'm a working artist. I've been working for 40 years. I'm finally able to focus on my work. And this is the work of my life. And I need it to also sustain me financially for 5 years, And so I really like to investigate that with artists in terms of really understanding where they're coming from and what the artist book and what their work is doing for them. And that is something that I kind of am carrying over in a lot of ways as I'm meeting people in this new role. I'll get back to some of that content, but the one thing I wanted to share, and this is going to relate to some of the things that I'm going to share about opportunities at BIMA, is that, one of my great pleasures at Women's Studio was to be the person who was kind of responsible for the visibility of the story of that organization. So some of you are probably familiar with Women's Studio Workshop, but it was founded in 1974. They just had their 50th anniversary, and I came in as in a leadership transition. So I was replacing one of the founding artistic directors. And, one of the things that I was able to accomplish while I was there was kind of raising visibility around the history of that work, the artists who'd worked there, and to create an archive, establish an archive space with the staff. And so one of the ways that I worked towards that was to not only tell stories in the archive centering the artist book collection, but to fundraise in order to have an archivist position created and made a piece of a permanent staff member, which is true at that organization to this day. And so, these are just a couple of nice archive shots, but, it's not going to the next slide. But one of the things that I worked on, which is going to extend over into a series at BEMA for this year, is a series called Up from the Archives, where I worked to illuminate stories within the WSW, collections, and to create a series of, there were Zoom events, because this was 2022, 2023, to kind of just create new stories around the artist book or the history of that organization, and invite scholars and artists to participate in the production of interesting conversations. And so I'll stop with I'm going to stop with my images and just talk a little bit about the things that are kind of coming up at BEMA in terms of, and the way that relates to you all thinking about placing your work and writing artist statements. We're going to, I just started at the museum in October. I have collaborated with BEMA on projects in my previous role in creating the Indigenous Artist residency that was a collaboration between BEMA and Women's Studio Workshop, and those books are being worked on currently, or if they're not already in the world. But I'm really happy to be working as a curator at this really pivotal moment in the museum, where we are really ready to kind of think about the ways that we can, kind of highlight the uniqueness of the fact that we are a museum with a very large and growing collection and a dedicated exhibition space to the artist book, which is really significant and exciting. And so one thing that's going to be happening is that the collection is going to go onto a searchable database for the first time, so that the public is going to be able to access the almost 4,000 artist books that are in the BEMA collection. We're working on a data migration right now and a few other things that make this quite a headache to achieve. But the books will, slowly unfold. Not all of them are going to go public at once, but the collection will be searchable. There will be images, and ideally you'll be able to search by material and by artist and by thematic content and lots of other exciting things. And some of you are probably familiar with the Artist Books Unshelved series. Yuka Petz, who was working with Catherine Alice Michaels on that series for years, they've done 88 episodes. It is a treasure of a resource because of the level of sort of critical analysis that occurs and the way that those artist books are looked at so deeply. And, at first, when I heard that Yuka had decided, she's moved to Oregon and she's decided not to do the program anymore, at first I was sort of devastated. I thought, oh gosh, that's not the kind of show I can do. I'm definitely not that person. But then I realized, after I kind of broke free of that it's an opportunity to kind of tell stories in a really different way. And so this year we're going to have season 6 of Artist Books Unshelved open and tell stories about the history of the artist book and some of the books in the collection in a mini documentary format, and bring in lots of new voices that are going to contribute in that way. And so, the one thing about that I kind of wanted to mention in terms of speaking to you all about artist statements and representing your work, everything that was mentioned previously, I agree with, and those were all really great pieces of information. But I also, I want to, in my role, there are so many people who send me emails, and when I go to Codex in a couple of weeks, I'm going to try to talk to every single person. So if I see you there, I will say so. Grab me if you want to, but I'm going to try to actually talk to every single person, because it's new for me to be in this particular role, and I really want to make sure that I'm meeting people, especially because the ways that I know these works oftentimes are through the artist. And that's something that I really gain the most information from, is when I'm able to engage with an artist one-on-one. And I love Codex for that, but it is exhausting, as you all know. Oh, but what I was going to say about that is I I've really been looking at the responsibility that I have in terms of communication with artists and being aware of artists. And I think there's a lot of ways that we put a lot of that labor on the artist, where we say, not only do you have to make the work, but you have to also write a fabulous 4 sentences that's going to make everyone want to open this book, right? Which is not easy for everyone, as you all know. And so I'm actually kind of trying to reevaluate that responsibility a little bit on my end and make myself as approachable as possible, but to make sure that every single person who takes the time to kind of send me an email where they're telling me about their new work, that I will then be able to respond to them in some way that's actually meaningful for them. And this comes from my work working in a residency program. You know, there were hundreds, I mean, I've read thousands of artist statements. And I always felt like it was such a disservice to artists to demand that you apply over and over again for something, and that you actually never hear back from those in leadership about why you didn't, should you apply again. And this is a lot of communication and a lot of capacity conversations in terms of how you can give feedback to individuals. But what I have decided to do, and this hasn't happened yet, I wanted to have this open on the website before I was meeting all of you today, but I didn't manage to do that. But I'm going to actually create a submission form for the BIMA collection and try to make it as accessible as possible in the ways that individuals can propose their work for purchase, or to have a meeting about their work, because and then that those individuals will hear something back from me. I know how it feels to kind of just send emails into the void, and that if I have a form online, it kind of creates a to-do list. When you just get something in the mail, I'm sure many of you work in positions like this where you get an email from artists. You want to be attentive to that individual and their work, but you check your email all day and you never have the focus energy to say, oh, I'm going to go back to those 10 emails. And so this is a way, at least, that I think that people who are in purchasing roles or in curatorial capacity can kind of manage that labor and take some of that labor and communication away from the artists, and engage more authentically with them, I guess. And so then I'll be able to set aside time to, manage through proposals. And I'm still kind of working on that criteria. I'm actually learning from what was mentioned today, because it helps me decide what I'm going to actually ask artists for, like how many sentences of a statement, or how minimal should that be, or, and things like that. So the thing my big takeaway, I guess, is for this is not necessarily contributing much in terms of how you should represent yourself in a statement, but I do think that I just want you all especially to know that I'm someone who's willing to always have a conversation about a book, and that if you, especially since Codex is coming up soon, if you see me, please stop and say hi, and maybe we'll become friends. But okay, I think that is I think I touched on most of the things I was gonna mention.
Well, thank you to all of our speakers. Each one of you had a unique point of view, and I'm sort of jotting notes down to say that, Johanna, I really loved your focus on what we can share to illuminate how the work is interpreted and how individuals understand the book, because sometimes being new to the book arts, it's somewhat intimidating. So I think having that opportunity to really understand what the artist is conveying. Alicia, I love the fact that you do digital notebooks. It's amazing to think about how you can search through your own personal archive and find ideas and connections. And Erin, it's wonderful to know how approachable you want to make the BIMA collection. It's such a spotlight in our community. And I really value the fact that you work with artists to help understand how you can put that book together. Like, being that creative director of the book is really important. And I think that would make a huge impact with a lot of artists. So we do have a bit of time for questions. And I wonder if there are any questions in the chat that we might want to start out with.
There is one question to Alicia. What device do you use to write with laptop, phone, iPad? What do you use?
Any and all of the above. I travel a lot. I'm offline a lot by, design. I don't use I mean, anything that I can store. So I write rarely on my phone, but frequently on a desktop and different. Somebody has a PC, I need to access my thoughts, I will sit down and be able to do that. I have a local area network that I can access if I need to and I'm far away. Because that way, again, I'm not looking around for that one particular thing. So we can make anything work.
Johanna.
Yeah, so I wanted to just comment a bit. First of all, Alicia, I love your system, but to me, the idea of like all that's involved in setting that up is overwhelming to me. So again, come to my house and do it for me. But I wanted to talk with Erin because I just love the idea that you are formalizing a pipeline for submissions. I just think that that is such an important move because in my experience, so much of what happens in terms of acquisitions and collection development with artist books happens in a more ad hoc and often informal kind of way. And I think formalizing these transactions will be it gives it another level of structure and intellectual credibility and I think respect on both sides. So I just really think this is a terrific move. And one of the things that would be an interesting other conversation to have down the road is to go back to some of the discussions that I had with a group of artists and librarians about 20 years ago about the metadata for describing artist books.
Yeah.
And that schema is still used in my own descriptions of the books I have on my website. Artist Books Online disappeared for reasons that have to do with infrastructure, though maybe Alicia wants to revive it for me. But I think that the reason I bring up metadata is not so much to celebrate what we did, though I think it was really useful, but because I think the kind of categories that we put into that metadata were ways of getting people, it kind of made it easier for people to describe their books in a way. It's like, are you using sequence? Is it a narrative? What kind of, there was almost like a checklist that people could work with in terms of reflecting on their own work. So I mentioned this as a way to shift some of the intellectual labor into a community of practice rather than making every artist have to come up with that language themselves. So anyway, it's just again, a thought for a later conversation sometime. But I think it's really great that you're doing that.
Yes, thank you. It's something I've actually thought about reaching out to you recently because it's such a big project with us, not only, as you say, more eloquent than me, the formalizing the pipeline for people reaching out, but in having our collection online in the most meaningful way and using the most, the best metadata that ideally we won't have to rewrite or to make that decision now while we're working on it for the first time is something, we're doing in the next year and a half or so.
Erin, I have a quick question about your searchable database. Is this going to be on OCLC or is it going to be contained in the?
It's contained.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was a question about understanding what metadata is, and Ray Zill, who is the art librarian at the Evergreen College, has just put a link into the chat, and there are several organizations such as the Art Library Society of America that work closely with describing books. But I think you raise a really great question because let's say you're entering an exhibition for the first time and you're asked by the curators to describe your book, you might be stumped as to how to describe that book, what terminology to use. So providing guidance and assistance with that is really helpful.
That's a great idea.
Catalogers love that too.
Yeah, catalog.
Catalogers are great,
Yeah.
and again, I think that, getting again, we don't have to like get obsessive about, sort of following strict cataloging rules so much as, pull up a few basic concepts and, put those into a form. So it's like, what genre is this? Is it narrative, photography, a visual, work? Is it a material, are the materials central? If so, what are they? It's just, there's so many fundamental things, I think, because books are very complicated spatial and temporal objects in a way that is very distinct from a lot of static art that we look at on the wall or encounter in a gallery. So there are many properties to the book that, we understand and pay attention to when we're making or reviewing. But, again, thinking about how to like, just give somebody that framework. It's like, okay, tell us about these, 6 categories. It doesn't have to be 26 categories,
Yeah.
because that's the other thing. You don't want to overwhelm people with description.
I think knowing that we have several librarians in our organization and on this call, a nice follow-up to all of you is that we could compile a list of some of the visual image databases and metadata resources that we have that might be useful as you continue this discussion. There was an interesting chat question from Mark Hopman, who was interested in archiving your own work using open internet sites or other resources. He was looking to know about types of sites where you could upload images and make them publicly available. Are any of you familiar with resources such as that might be out there?
There's resources that are designed, they're designed to catalog. They're designed for galleries, I think, more than individual artists, but they do exactly that. But I don't think they present in a book format. They're just a collection. So other than that, no.
I mean, you can use some. I believe in HTML myself, because again, I think it's a theory of poor media. It's like the closer you are to HTML, the more sustainable your project is. So HTML and CSS, and learning how to use those on the W3 site is very easy. And so but you still have to have a domain name if you're going to have stuff online. Somebody has to host the material. So, you can do it through something like Squarespace. Again, that makes it relatively easy, almost at the point of drag and drop, that you can do. And I think for someone getting started, that works really well. If your goal is to have a site where your work can be seen and where you can write about it and make it accessible. Again, you use a service like Squarespace, they will help you set up the domain, name and keep it, running and up and so forth. So, again, I learned the hard way about, obsolescence, because the years of work we put into artist books online just evaporated at a certain moment.
Pat Chupa also indicated that she was sort of interested in that topic of archiving one's work and legacy. And Jody, not to put you on the spot, but I know you and Bonnie with the Northwest Guild did a series a couple of summers ago on professional practices, and we did cover some ideas about archiving artists' work, and maybe that's a topic for another conversation, but I'm correct, right, Jody?
Yep, you are correct. And I think all these suggestions are really helpful. I think the issue for the archive, the repository, is the consistency of the organization of the data. So if it's 1,700 different ways it's all coming together, it makes it impossible to really search across those collections. And that's the point that I wanted to make. The the great advantage, I mean, aside from all the things we can think of individually, the great advantage to this consistent data storage or data organization is that it is in fact searchable. And so you can query the data and ask questions about trends or changes or how much, if there's a social event that's happened, does that impact how this art genre moves or changes or responds? I mean, what are these larger things? And this gets to this point that I think and why I respect Dr. Drucker so much is because she has pointed to this new genre. And in order for us to establish and make it strong and keep it growing, we have to be able to research it and write about it in a critical and philosophical kind of way. So all this data together, Alicia, your data journals, your digital journals are invaluable for that kind of thing, that just allow us to get way in there. And Erin, you're going to pull off this submission form and this new new way that a museum can make its collections accessible far beyond the exhibition or even, personal visits to look at particular things. So all of a sudden, everything is now available in a completely different way. And I think that's very exciting. So very important. Archives very important.
Thanks, Jody. And I think we have time for one more question, so I'm just going to put it out there. We didn't discuss it, but what's your personal opinion about AI in an artist books and writing or in the workplace as a curatorial?
I am unfamiliar really in any practical way with AI. I mean, we use AI all the time for banking and Google Maps and all that other stuff. But in terms of using it as a tool for creative practice, I am unfamiliar and I aspire to kind of keep it at a distance.
Remain unfamiliar.
I don't have time to.
I want to build on Jody's comment because I think that AI is going to be very, very helpful with the kind of tasks that, again, to borrow a word from Alicia, the drudgery aspect was too much, which is if you want to integrate, for instance, data sets across that are not structured in the same way, but figure out the crosswalks and integrate them. I was just talking to a friend of mine before this meeting who's a French academic who's running a data program, starting a data program in Lyon, and he was saying he's been using Claude, which is a brand new AI application, and he says it's amazing because all of these materials he has that are structured in very different formats, he can get Claude to do various kinds of crosswalks and integrations. So I think that there's, so it's not just structured data, but what we call unstructured data in the text format that would be able to be integrated. So I think it's going to be very helpful for that kind of activity. For writing, I have a friend who wrote an AI book entirely, but from AI. And I have to say, it doesn't speak. It's oddly flat.
Mhm.
It's as though there's no voice there. And it's almost uncanny how it doesn't work. So, maybe that will change. I like writing, so I don't need AI to do it for me.
Yeah.
I have noticed a distinct quality with the artist statements that come in with submissions that they have that flat tone.
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah, you can tell.
there's certain words and certain phraseology and yeah, and I suspect that AI has played a hand and that's fine. It gets the job done, but
Yeah,
I
they
think
lack angst. A real artist statement has
Yeah.
some
you need to
angst.
suffer.
I think
Erin,
it
what do
can be
you
kind of
think?
an interesting tool in terms of if you're using it really to ask yourself questions that you might, to put in a piece of writing and not have it write it for you, but to have it say, ask a prompt about the writing or what's missing from this, or, I don't know. I imagine it could be useful if you're using it to actually challenge your writing rather than to complete the task.
Complete it.
Cool.
Well, I think we've reached our time frame, and I do want to thank all three of our speakers, as well as Celine and Jody. It's been a great session. There's lots of thank yous in the chat. And I think what we've discovered is there are a lot more topics to talk about in terms of how we present and document artist books, our archives, and write about them. So perhaps we can invite you back for a second talk in the near future. And thank you all for joining us. And Lori, thank you so much for
Yeah,
handling the Zoom meeting. And it's so great to see all of you here today. And Celine and Jody, any parting words before we log off?
Find your hearts out,
Find your hearts out.
Well, thanks all of you. It's a real treat to meet those of you I haven't met before and to have had this conversation. So
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You.